Maggie, a Korean indie film. It has been made back in 2018 and went around several festivals, but didn't get a proper theatrical release anywhere in the world until now because it has been released in Poland. I went into it knowing nothing, save for the fact that it won a bunch of awards at various Asian festivals. And honestly, even after seeing it, it's kind of difficult to explain what the movie is actually about. The story starts in a hospital where an X ray picture is taken of a naked couple fooling around in the X ray room. And then this picture is displayed in front of the building. Nobody knows who took it, but more importantly, nobody is sure who is in it. As it turns out, a lot of people did at some point have sex in the X ray room, so nobody is sure if it's not actually them in the picture. One of the nurses thinks it's her and her boyfriend and gets ready to resign from her job, but changes her mind after a conversation with the hospital director, a conversation which sparks friendship between the two women. Meanwhile, the boyfriend in question, who is this deadbeat lazy guy, finally finds a job working on sealing mysterious sinkholes that start appearing around Seoul, apparently as a result of earthquakes. That's as much as I'm willing to say about the story, and really, the story is not the primary driving force of the film. I think it's one of those movies where the plot just seems to happen in the background, but the film itself is more of a collection of scenes rather than one straightforward story. Instead, it focuses on characters, on the characters' relationships and the various absurd situations that they get into. The tone is very much comedic, and the type of comedy is properly weird. I mean, there were multiple times where, over the course of the film, where I was just throwing my hands up in the air, asking myself, what in the world was I watching? But admittedly, there were also multiple scenes where I laughed out loud. I certainly had a lot of fun watching the film, experiencing it, even if I wasn't entirely conscious of what the movie was trying to say, if that makes sense. Afterwards, I talked to a friend who I saw it with, and she believes the movie is deeply feminist at its core, consistently showing the female characters as the ones who get things done and push things forward, whereas the men present in the story are pretty much exclusively useless in every aspect. I have to say, I kind of agree with that interpretation. I think we're onto something here, especially with the way the movie ends. Nonetheless, I think it's not a particularly easy thing to decipher, and I wouldn't be surprised if someone else had a completely different view on Maggie as a film. Apart from the oddball story, the two things that stood out to me were the really cool soundtrack, comprised in large part of contemporary songs, which somehow fit the meandering, relaxed, and this carefree atmosphere of the movie. And the second thing is the cinematography. I think the movie is shot rather cleverly. The framing is never quite obvious, but rather trying to make the images more interesting whenever possible. But it is also very competent at setting things up for a later payoff. Like, there's a dartboard that appears several times in the hospital, kind of in the background, and then becomes the central element of one of the scenes. It happens a few times that you have an object that suddenly turns important, but it doesn't come out of nowhere. It was shown there before, it was present in the story, deliberately, and I really like that. Also, a lot of the humor is visual, which is so refreshing after this modern tendency of especially American cinema to reduce jokes to just wordplay and funny lines, just saying stuff. Here, the stuff that I laughed at the most was purely physical comedy, done very, very right. So, is Maggie a good film? God, I don't know. What it is about, I'm not 100% sure. But I did have a lot of fun watching it, and I found it extremely endearing. It has its imperfections, and it has moments which drag a little bit, but as a whole, it was weirdly enjoyable.